Thank you so much for being here this morning. It's been an honor for the city of Jacksonville to host the U.S. Conference of Mayors National Leadership Meeting on Exports and Ports. Let's give the U.S. Conference of Mayors a hand for mayors, port directors, and trade specialists discussed yesterday the various issues and challenges that our nation faces in promoting exports and modernizing our ports. And this morning we're joined by key members of the Jacksonville business community to participate in this session. So I want to thank the members of the Jacksonville community for coming out this morning. Thank you so much. After opening remarks, we will open the floor to both mayors and the Jacksonville community for questions and comments. So you will have an opportunity to ask questions, everyone who's locally who were invited, and make comments. Our recent U.S. Metro Economy reports tells us that over the past decade, the merchandise value of our manufacturing exports in the U.S. has tripled. And over the coming decade, exports will account for nearly 40% of real growth in our gross domestic product. Our metro areas account for 88% of our nation's exports, with 20 the biggest metro economies comprising 50% of the total U.S. share. That means that by focusing on increasing exports, we can have a broad impact on our metro economies throughout the nation. And that's what it's about. How do we leverage ports and exports to put America back to work? And that's what we tend to do, and we're here to discuss that. We have tremendous opportunities over the next several years to make this a priority. I know in Jacksonville, Florida, I made Jacksport a top priority of my administration. Just in Jacksonville, the port is a $19 billion economic engine. It has already created 65,000 jobs, and the average salary is $44,000 a year. So export alone were valued at $1.9 billion in 2010. So we know it's a value in our cities, and I believe by working with mayors all around the country, we can get it done. In addition to the mayors, I am so humbled and honored that we have our leader, the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, the mayor of Los Angeles. Welcome, Mr. President. Let's welcome our president. I want to tell you a little bit about him. Now, everybody knows he's the mayor, but he has an impressive background. Before he became mayor, he was a California assemblyman, and in Florida, that would equate Mayor Jones to a state representative. And he rose from that to become Speaker of California. And as we know, ports are a serious business. In L.A. and Long Beach, we can't compete, but they're number one in the country. But more importantly, I want to thank the mayor for forming this task force, appointing me to be the chair of the task force. He's a humble man who dropped out of high school and then found himself and finished high school and went on to UCLA and then went to law school. Someone who believes in the American dream, that if you work hard and play by the rules, that you can make it in this country. I am so proud to welcome our president, Antonio Villaraigosa, the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Let's give him a hand.
I wrote that introduction. Slipped him a thank you note for reading it just as I wrote it. Let me acknowledge and thank Mayor Alvin Brown, who's taken the city by storm, but also the conference. From the beginning, he acknowledged and recognized that this port here in Jacksonville is a big part of your economy. It's the motor force, and he is absolutely focused like a laser beam on making sure that you grow that port, that you take advantage of the fact that very soon the Panama Canal will be expanding. And he, early on, I mean, it must have been the first 3 minutes that he was in the conference, said, I want to chair the committee, the task force here at the conference that will be working on this issue of ports. And I want to acknowledge you and thank you for your leadership for hosting us today. I didn't get to be here yesterday. I was stuck in transit. I think I got here about 1:30 or 2 in the morning. And I did have my UCLA shirt this morning when I worked out. But I understand that it went really, really well. And let me share a few thoughts, and then we'll open it up. You know, in LA Long Beach, and I know my colleague Mayor Foster was here, and I heard did a great job as he always does. We have sister ports. The Port of LA is slightly larger than Long Beach, but together we move about 44% of the seaborne goods that enter the United States of America. So if you saw me last Friday with Vice President Xi Jinping welcoming him at the port, we welcomed him because we move about a little more than 40% of their goods. Now, that won't always be, but that's what it is today. And obviously, my port, your port, and the ports represented here are all working together to get as much of the market share as we can, to make sure that we're making the appropriate investments. Part of why I took Vice President Xi Jinping to the port was 5 years ago when I first went to China. The China shipping was about to leave our port. We hadn't approved EIRs at my port in a decade. We were being sued by the environmentalists and the public health organizations, by the communities surrounding us. I don't have to tell you all that port activity does have some detrimental impacts on the environment. And in LA, as an example, the city with almost every year at the top in terms of poor air quality, the port is a big driver of that. And so early on, I took on this notion. I said, look, we're going to grow our port. We have to grow our port. Our port generates about 1 million jobs, direct and indirect, and it's critical to the LA economy. But we got to green it too, because we've been sued again and again and again and again, and we were losing those lawsuits, and we were unable to approve our EIRs. So I developed a strategy to green our port, to grow our port. That is the most far-reaching strategy to green a port in the world. Not to grow one, though we're growing it too. China seems to, I think we were number 3 when I started out as mayor, maybe number 5. Were we 5? 5? Now we're 9. Now we're number 9, and the other ports that have taken over are all in China. So obviously a big challenge for us. But we're growing our port. And so I went to China Shipping, and I said to them, look, we've got a strategy to grow our port. We're going to be the greenest port in the world, but you got to work with us. I promise you we'll do it. So when I went back to China in December, I went back with the news that, in fact, we were growing that facility. We were doubling the size of that facility. About 10,000 jobs generated from just growing that one facility at China Shipping. So if you saw Vice President Xi Jinping looking at those ships, he was there to see promises made, promises kept, that we doubling the size of the China Shipping facility there. And we are, because while we do move 44% of the seaborne goods, and while we're all vigorously competing against one another to gain in market share. One of the best places to do that is in exports. I mean, how many port officials here today? Well, it's only a few of you. Oh, my good. So this is mostly your business community, the general business community. Yeah, they were here yesterday. Okay. So I'm a day late. So, and not a dollar short. So, when you look at 8 out of 10 of the next new markets, they're out of the country, everybody. This export thing that we're trying to focus our cities on has everything to do with the fact that if we want to be competitive in a global economy, we're going to have to compete in the area of exports. We're going to have to send our exports to the other countries of the world. Just so that you understand where the world is going. If you took China and India out of the equation, Asia has a larger economy than Europe. If you took Latin America, you think of Mexico, you think of Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Venezuela. You take Latin America from Mexico down all the way down south. They have an economy the size of Europe. Both Asia, without China and India, and Latin America's economies are growing faster than ours and faster than Europe's. So where are the new markets? The new markets are in Latin America. The new markets are in Asia. And we've got to be focused on those new markets. And, I think the number, you heard Mayor Brown talk about, 90% of the GDP of the country is generated in our cities, in cities like Jacksonville. In fact, if you took the top 3 cities, New York, LA, and Chicago, we have a GDP the size of France. If you took the top 10 cities, the metropolitan areas of the top 10 cities, we'd be a $5 trillion economy, the 3rd largest GDP in the world. So 90% of the GDP of the nations generated in our cities. As cities go, so go the nation. And increasingly, if we want to figure out how we put people back to work, exports the place to do it. 95% of the world's consumers reside outside of our borders. When you think of that, we've got to get focused on it. When you realize that even in places like LA and New York, which 2 of the biggest economies, even there, very few of our companies are exporting. In fact, the vast majority of them don't. And yet, we have products that people are looking for, but we're not figuring out how to do it. So we put this with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, this Mayor's Export Ready Challenge. We're calling on our mayors to commit to the development of comprehensive metropolitan export plans. We're working with the Brookings Institution. We brought them together. And, is Ryback here, Mayor Ryback? Or Mayor Adams? Coleman or Minor? I just want to acknowledge them. They were here. I just want to acknowledge them for their work because they also helped to put in their cities a plan to develop and expand exports. Just in LA right now, we're already on track to meet the goal that President Obama said of doubling the number of our exports. Now, when I say double, we weren't, almost all those big containers that come into LA, they leave empty. That's probably true. Well, in fact, I know it's true for Jacksonville. It's true for almost every city, every port city in the country. And we got to change that. It makes a lot more sense to fill those containers with our products, with aircraft materials, with the products that you make here in Jacksonville, in Charleston, in Baltimore, in New York, in Houston, in Oakland and in my city of Los Angeles. So we're focused on this area. We're working to develop a national strategy around this issue. We think it's very, very important. But what people don't realize, they think, well, in order to put a plan like this together, it's not just going to be the ports and our cities as an example. You know, you're going to connect it with your universities, with your Chamber of Commerce, with your manufacturers, with your small business organizations. This is an effort that has to be comprehensive. It's got to be multi-pronged, and it's got to be connected to not just the goods, but to the intellectual capital and other assets that cities and port cities have. And so I couldn't be more excited to be here. This is where it's at, everybody. This is where our future is. And we've got to figure out how I tell my son went to China. He went to Henan province when he was 15, I think it was. And he was learning Mandarin. And, you know, he was born in the U.S. like I was. So he speaks English, and he took Spanish in school. So he speaks English, Spanish, and some Mandarin. I said, you know, in our schools today, I mean, you want to connect the export strategy, you start teaching Mandarin and Spanish in your schools, because that's where the markets are. You know, when you go traveling and you want to sell your goods, you can sell them a lot better if you can speak their language. It's not absolutely necessary, but, you know, it certainly is an asset. And you know, connecting all of those things to focus on where the new markets are, to focus where the job creation is the key. And again, I want to thank Mayor Brown for having us, and I think we're going to be answering some questions or something. So, thank you very much.
What we'll do is hear from some of our mayors, and I'd like to call on our Mayor Smith, Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, Mayor Smith, to give some comments or questions. There you go. Mike, right there.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There we go. Mesa, Arizona. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so very much, Mayor Brown. Mr. President, Mayor Villaraigosa, welcome. Thank you so very much, first of all, to those of you from the Jacksonville community. We mayors have been just overwhelmed by the hospitality of the Jacksonville community, Mayor Brown and his staff, and thank you so very much for welcoming us here to discuss what on the surface, and if you look at the title, seems like somewhat of a mundane subject, ports, exports, things like that. But when you delve into it just a little bit, you understand how, in many ways, the economic future of our country depends upon our ability to take full advantage of the opportunities that are created with the global economy. And I hope, and I think that over the last day and a half now, we have had discussions and talked about things in a way that gives me confidence that we can move forward with a specific plan that will bring change to how this country looks at not only its crumbling infrastructure, but specifically its ports and how you get in and out of those ports, how you get to and from those ports inland. And I know that the U.S. Conference of Mayors, especially after we meet in June in Orlando, will have a very well-defined strategy to make this country aware of the needs we have. It's unfortunate that infrastructure, which has been one of the most bipartisan issues in this country over the last certainly 50, 60 years, or really in our history, has all of a sudden become one of two things. Number one, when it is discussed on the national level, which is not enough, it seems to have taken on somewhat of a partisan tone, which is unfortunate, because our solutions are not partisan in nature, they're American nature, as Mayor Villaraigosa has been so good to point out with his programs and initiatives. We appreciate the opportunity we have to point out the importance of investing in our future. And truly is an investment, and it will take a national commitment. It will take the political fortitude. It will take the commitment of Americans. It's bad enough that we have literally fallen behind others in the world. That's not the American way. We generally have responded when we fall behind things. I was reminded, and I know this is a big stretch, but just this last week we celebrated the 50th anniversary of John Glenn circling the Earth, and there was one thing that Americans looked at, and that was when the Russians put Sputnik into orbit. Now, I of course was far too young to remember that, and everyone who laughed did remember it. But the thing is that Americans got pissed off. We said, this is not America. We're not here to stand by and watch the rest of the world pass us by. We need to get pissed off about infrastructure and about ports and about how we are lagging, because it is not only our future, but most importantly, it's our kids and our grandkids' future we're talking about here. And the things that we have, the challenge that we have is daunting, but America has always risen to that level, and I appreciate and hope that as we get through this discussion, we can focus our country once again on building our ports, rebuilding, improving our highways, other things, and doing it in as quickly as a manner as we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Smith and Mayor Brown. This is another focus of the Conference of Mayors. We move 90. I mean, we as I said, we generate about 90% of the GDP of the country. When you look at what makes an economy competitive, you need infrastructure. It's one of the elements of a competitive economy. It's why when you travel to Europe, when you go to Latin America, when you go to Asia, you see those companies focused on building their airports, on building their ports and expanding the ports. I told you, we've been growing our port every year. We're still moving about 44% of the goods. And we went from number 5 to number 9 because China's investing in their infrastructure in a way that boggles the mind. No nation has ever seen in that short period of time the kind of investment that they're making in their infrastructure. At our own port, to stay competitive, if we're going to take advantage, if you all particularly can take advantage of the opening of the Panama Canal, you got to have ports that are deep to accept the big ships. We're dredging our harbor. It's not a penny. Very, very few dollars come from. I don't think any come from the federal government. It's about $384 million. $384 million. We're spending about $1.5 billion at the port, generating about 20,000 jobs because we want to compete. We want to grow our facilities. I just mentioned the growth of China shipping. We're spending 40,000 jobs, $4 billion at the airport, because if you've ever gone to LAX, it's not an airport that looks like a gateway to the Pacific, and that's going to change. We're very proud of that. But all of us have to be investing in our ports and our airports. It used to be that the federal government would partner with us, and I think Mayor Smith hit something right on the head to the business people here. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO don't agree on much, but they're 100% in agreement that we have to pass the Surface Transportation Bill, that we have to repair our roads, our highways, that we have to invest in high-speed rail, in public transit, that we have to make the investments that will move the goods. So Mayor Smith hit something right on the head. And in fact, the Surface Transportation Bill is in the Congress right now. It's in the House. It's passed the committee and the Senate. We got to get that passed.
It's a $476 billion
The
bill. It's $20 more billion than it was before, so it's a major asset.
the House version was a 6-year bill.
Yep.
At that amount, the Senate version was 110 billion, 2 years. But they have to pass a bill so that we can make those investments. So that point, Ms. Smith, wherever you are, Mayor Smith,
So-
very, very important.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we're going to hear from a couple more mayors, and then we'll open it up to the community. So Mayor Carney from Des Moines, Iowa, we'll hear from you. Sedalia from Little Rock, Arkansas, Mark. And then Mayor Wild from Westland, Detroit, metro area.
All right, mayors and everyone in Jacksonville, again, I just want to echo our thanks from the mayors. The hospitality that has been shown to us has just been outstanding, and thank you so much for holding this conference. Mayor Villagrosa, it might not surprise you that just before Vice President Xi Jinping came to L.A., he was in Des Moines.
I know he was.
And as we connect all those places, here we are in the heartland, and they came because they need food. They want to talk about food. They want to talk about their future. And so we signed a multi-billion-dollar contract to deliver food resources, principally soybeans and corn, to China. It's so important that certainly this conference that we had here that discusses the future of our economy, and knowing that exports are 40% of that potential growth over the next decade, and also knowing that somehow we have to have the capacity at your ports to move these goods and services overseas to these countries that are looking for our quality and our goods and our potential. So as you expand the ports, we need to also understand that that's the delivery point, but the process of getting the goods from Iowa to L.A. into your port, we have to have that transportation bill. We have to understand that all these departments and all these pieces fit together like hand in glove. We need to understand that the investments that need to be made in the port, you can only move the goods in and out if you have good infrastructure, whether it be rail, roads, or rivers, that are brought up to 21st century standards so that we can have and realize that potential. So thank you again for having this great gathering of mayors and businesses around this country to look at that potential, look at that future, but let's not miss the opportunity to remind Congress that they have to put all these pieces together, and they have to move together, Mayor Villagrosa, that transportation bill, because that's so important for us to get our goods from Des Moines, Iowa to L.A. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor Brown, Mark Sodola, the mayor of Little Rock. And to the citizens of Jacksonville that are here, we're very proud of your mayor. He's been a great leader for us on this issue and really focusing an emphasis on it. Mayor Villagrosa, one of the things that I'd like to emphasize, and while we talk about seaports, I think it's important that we understand the perspective of inland ports, too, yes, on our waterways. We have a port in Little Rock, and I will tell you that through the recessionary times of the last 3 years, it was our port that allowed us to be named by the Brookings Institution as having the 4th best metropolitan economy in the country, something we're very proud of. It's because of the ability to find ways to move these goods and services from the heartland of America to our seaports that is so critically important. And while seaports talk about depths of excess of 50 feet, we're talking about depths in excess of the 9 feet or 12 feet that we need along the Arkansas River and down the Mississippi River down to the Port of New Orleans. So I want to focus, and I want us to emphasize that from a national agenda issue, this is critically important. And as I think you're fond of saying, we don't create jobs, we create the environment for jobs. And so our ports and our harbors are extraordinarily important as it relates to that. And we have to urge Congress to make sure that there's enough money to make sure that this infrastructure is maintained, because the movement of goods and services, as we have heard, is so critically important in this world economy. I know we had Tom Friedman speak to us about that at our January meeting, and he emphasized the importance of that and how quick it happens. And so I just am very happy to see that we're talking about this now. One of the fourth largest drilling pipe companies in the world decided to locate in Little Rock because of the port and because of the waterway. And over the last 36 months, they have created, and will be creating by the end of the year, 800 jobs with an annual payroll of $40 million. That is the kind of stimulus that the issue of our ports and exports cause for our citizens and for our cities. And so I hope as we carry this dialogue on in Congress that we can emphasize that is really how we stay competitive in this global economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Now we'll hear from Mayor Weil.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Weil from the city of Westland, Michigan. I've been trying to do my best for the last couple of days to represent the Port of Detroit and the 38 Great Lakes ports as well. Mayor Villagrosa, you'd mentioned that you had to dredge the Port of Los Angeles to the tune of $380 million with little or no help from the federal government. And we talked a little bit this weekend about the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund that's sitting there with $6 billion in it, and those $6 billion were taxed to go into this fund, and this fund was supposed to be used to maintain our ports, to expand our ports, do infrastructure repairs. So now we've heard a little bit this weekend that perhaps those funds aren't even available. If they're not available, we need to find out why. If this was the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund, and they're not using it for what it's meant for, why not just call it the Harbor Maintenance Slush Fund? So, so if those dollars aren't available, I could say in the Great Lakes right now we need $200 million to do dredging that we need right now to keep the St. Lawrence Seaway moving. So we need access to those funds too. If in fact those funds are not available, what we need to do is come up with some sort of lockbox in the future for all the additional funds going in the future, that those funds will be available. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. At this time, we'll open it up for comments or questions from the community. I see Paul Anderson. Paul, you want to go ahead? I know you have some comments. But anybody else, if you have comments or questions, you can line up at the mic. We have mics all around. Please don't be shy to ask your questions or make some comments or suggestions or recommendation to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Again, my name is Paul Anderson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Jacksonville Port Authority. Mr. President and Mayors, thank you very much for your leadership on this critical issue facing our nation. It could not come at a more opportune time for you to lend your powerful advocacy to the issue of restoring our nation's critical infrastructure. Mayor, Mr. President, I work very closely with your Port Director. Geraldine is one of the finest examples of our leaders, and you're truly fortunate to have her leading your port. I am just not here today representing JAXPort. I am here representing the American Association of Port Authorities, which represents over 80 ports in the United States, Canada, Central and South America, and our president was here yesterday to participate, and as well as our president of the Florida Ports Council, which is 14 ports here in Florida. But we want to make sure that, number one, we recognize the work of your staff and your vision on this issue. I've been tasked by our chairman and board of directors to be the direct liaison to work with the mayors and your staff on helping advocate to the United States Congress, the White House, whatever path that you choose to take this, your metro exports and ports. And I think it's important to note a couple of facts related to that, some issues we feel you could be helpful immediately on. And Mayor Weil, thank you very much for pounding home the issue on the HMTF, the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. And that currently has a bill pending before Congress with over 150 House sponsors and over 40 Senate sponsors. and that would ensure the full use of the over $1.4 billion that's collected every year for the maintenance of our channels, our inland waterways, our rivers, to their current authorized depth. That would be very low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, for you all to endorse that. There's over 200 associations in the United States supporting that. Very quickly, I'd also ask that you consider working with other groups. We just had Governor Ed Rendell here. We had over 500 people for a transportation summit with his Building America's Future, which is also focused on restoring America's infrastructure, to pass some type of national policy that would include ports, exports, and maritime policy, which we currently do not have, with a national freight policy included in that. Our association, the American Association of Port Authorities, is dedicated to working with you, your leaders, your vision on this critical issue, and I will continue to work with Mayor Brown and your staff, who I just commend for their leadership, Tom and Dave, for what you've done, and will stand behind your efforts to support whatever endeavor that you end up taking on this critical issue. Again, thank you.
Thank you. So we've opened it up for the community, any business leaders, anyone from the chamber. Jerry Malott, I'm not sure if Jerry's here. Make a few comments. Jerry, you want to add any input to the mayors? It's open to anyone, anybody out there who wants to make a recommendation or comments.
Well, Mayor, the right things have been said. I don't know that I can add a lot, other than as we build this city and as you all build your cities, adding jobs is our ultimate criteria, and we're going to see great growth from the intermodal and logistics area. And it really comes down to a policy issue today. We're doing all the right things, but we don't have all the right tools. So as Paul said, adding your voice and your power nationally to get policies changed is where we need to go today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Anybody else? Oh, we got one coming up. Great.
Good morning. State Representative Mia Jones, and it's a pleasure for me to be able to be here with you, Mr. President, and of course, our mayor. Mr. President, you spoke about the impact of greening your port. Can you go a little bit into detail as to what that entailed and how long it took you to do that?
Yes, as I said, for the longest time, we were growing our port, and as we should, without regard to the public health consequences associated with port activity. There were two views. One view by my predecessors. One was the view that said we'd grow the port at all costs. Doesn't matter. It's too important to the LA economy. The other view was no, we got to green the port. We can't grow anymore. I took a different tact, and I said, look, of course we got to grow our port. Our port's the engine of the LA economy, but we got to green it too, because every attempt to grow our port, we were sued and stymied, and we weren't approving EIRs because of the public health consequences associated with port activity. We were, million lost school days for kids, high proportion of asthma and respiratory diseases. So we put a Clean Air Action Plan together that addresses some of the pollutants in the air that generated by port activity, a little technical, but NOx, which are nitrous oxides, DPM, which is diesel particulates, and SOx, which are sulfur oxides. We put goals to and then diesel emissions for trucks. Trucks cause a lot of the pollution in the area, and again, when you move as many goods as we do, we have thousands and thousands of trucks there every day. So we put a plan together, a clean truck program, whereby we required the people using our ports and moving our goods to have cleaner trucks. We've reduced diesel emissions from trucks by 80%. We've reduced SOx by 76%, DPM, diesel particulates, by 69%, and NOx by 52%. As I said, it's the most far-reaching effort to clean up a port in the world. And where I have a young, smarter than me person who's here with me, we're actually spending $3 billion. I didn't include the on-dock rail because it's not done yet, but the on-dock rail, the main channel, deepening project that I told you. I mentioned China shipping, but also APL and TRAPAC. All of those were approved. All of those EIRs, with the exception of one, all of them have been approved because we've minimized and mitigated the public health consequences of moving these goods. So we're continuing to grow the port and, making the investments, but that was the greening that I was mentioning. Now, it just depends. Some cities, with a port the size of ours, it was generating a pollution on a scale. Some cities don't have the air quality problems that LA has. We have mountains behind us, and so that kind of keeps the air there. But when I was a kid, you had to stay in your classroom. You couldn't go out to play because the air was so bad, and not just once or twice. Like this was like 50, 60 days like that, and now that almost never happens. So we've done a lot in the area to reduce, improve air quality and reduce pollution, and that is just one of them.
Any more questions or comments? Yes.
Good morning. Thank you so very much for allowing me to be here. I'm Deborah Thompson with Deborah K. Thompson Consultants, and I'd like to know of any creative or innovative ideas that you have to get small businesses who want to get into the port activity in your area. How can we organize to do that?
Sure. I'll have John Marks Mayor John Marks from Tallahassee has a comment on that.
That's a very, very good question, one that I've wondered about as well. I'm Mayor John Marks, City of Tallahassee, Board of Trustees for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as well as Vice Chair of the Transportation and Communications Committee for the U.S. Conference. We delved into that very question, how you can help small businesses. There is an organization out there that's willing to come to your city, and it's called Trade Connect. Write this name down, Trade Connect. You can Google them right now, and there's a lot of information. They will tell you the basics of importing and exporting. They will tell you to give you the cost, the risk associated with it. They have the information for small businesses for you to engage in import and export. There is one statistic that blew our minds yesterday. Only 1% of American businesses export. Think about that. So we've got to do a better job in terms of exporting. And, a lot of things we also talked about in terms of a national policy on freight and on transportation. We don't have those. And so we've got to get with our federal government, we got to get with those individuals and see whether or not we can develop some sort of a policy. And if we don't, I can tell you that I feel that the U.S. Conference of Mayors would do their part in terms of making sure that what we're talking about now happens. The city of Tallahassee doesn't have a port. We're not even on a river. But the fact of the matter is exports mean a lot to my city because we want to grow the businesses, and where the growth is, as we've already indicated, is overseas. It's in China. It's in India. So I'm very, very much interested in seeing how we can produce goods and services that we can export and how we can get those goods and services to the port. Our port actually is Jacksonville. My businesses in the city of Tallahassee will export out of Jacksonville. But we've got to increase our exports. And Trade Connect is where you should go. I'm going to do it. I'm going to have them come to my city, and as a matter of fact, it's at no cost to you.
Yeah, let me hit on that point. 1% of the 30 million companies export, and then 58% of them, of that 1%, only export to one country. So developing a strategy where we're looking at multiple markets is critical. And your question about small business is very, very important. In the Metropolitan Export Initiative that we put together in LA, we're focusing on small business because LA isn't the epicenter any longer of, Fortune 500 companies. It's the epicenter of small business in the United States. So that's who we're focusing on. All these small little niche companies that have a product that we can export around the world.
Thank you, Mr. President. We got one question in the back there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. President. I'm Leslie Smith, and I own Heavy Equipment Resources of Florida. 4 years ago, I still own C&L Landscapes, commercial landscape company here in Jacksonville. We've been here for 30 years. We landscaped our stadiums, our airports. But we went to an export series, my son and I, 4 years ago. It was put on by the mayor's office, the chamber, the port. And with the help of friends like Reginald Gaffney and Mr. Anderson, these guys, we've opened our business as Heavy Equipment Resources of Florida. We're the small guy. We're the grassroots guy that you guys are talking about. Well, we've taken our business. We sell heavy equipment, and we sell parts to the mining industry in the continent of Africa, mainly. But I think that that's where the awareness from our end needs to be. It's good to build the infrastructure. It's good, all the things that all you mayors are doing. But the people have to know about it to do these things. I mean, there's things like the suntan oils and the barbecue sauces and the things that I do. So our export series is put on, I think it was the first one in Florida. It was 6 years in the making. And that's what my son and I did, and we're doing pretty good at it. And we're traveling all over the world, and we're moving American products over to other places and beating the Chinese. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. David.
Hi, I'm David Lebetique with the Port of Los Angeles. The Trade Connect program that the mayor mentioned earlier is a program out of the Port of Los Angeles, but it is a model that is being adopted by the American Association of Port Authorities. They established a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Commerce. What the program does is it reaches out to small and medium-sized businesses and takes away the fear of exporting, because a lot of it is businesses in the LA area just didn't know how to export. And so we work with the U.S. Commercial Service, the Exim Bank. We work with freight forwarders and customs brokers and put it all together for small businesses and teach them and bring them through the steps on documentation, market access issues, financing, put that all together in a way that's very easy and seamless. And so this is a program that the Port of LA is willing to work with the Tallahassee Port and the Jacksonville Port and other ports through AAPA, and that program could come to your community as well. So that's essentially the idea and the approach of Trade Connect in Los Angeles.
Thank you, sir. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. President, Mayor Adams sends his regards, but I've been fortunate to be part of the Greater Portland Export Plan Development with Brookings, and I don't think we've given Brookings enough credit.
Make sure that he knows I mentioned him.
I will.
Acknowledge his leadership.
I'll text him. I'll tweet him in a moment. But anyhow, one of the sources of inspiration, I think, in this whole area comes from looking at what Brookings has done with the 4 different regions. And our goal in the Portland region, and we're starting to fund a 3-year program to hire the staff to do this, is to double our exports. And the one thing everybody should keep in mind that for every $1 billion in exports we create, that translates into 5,000 direct jobs. So if you want economic stimulus, it's right there. And if you're going to stretch it, we're at a stat of about 15,000. But it's hugely impactful to our economies. And this is something the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as we talked about this morning, has to take the leadership on. Nobody else is going to do it. We're where it's at. And we need to let every community know that there's not competition between regions on this. This can be done anywhere, and it's not that hard. And you talk about education, that's what we have to do. And we're actually staffing it in our small city of Beaverton. to get going on this stuff, the Import-Export Bank. So Brookings has done a yeoman's service with the 4 regions, and I would say get your hands on those documents because it's different by region, and that's the beauty of it. It's being shaped to work for you where you're at. So just a plug for Brookings.
Thank you. Question in the back?
I'll wait. I'll let her go first. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you so much for allowing me to come today. Mayor Brown, I have a question for you. During the Hazouri administration, there was a major effort to clean up Jacksonville's air. And as we are working to expand our ports and build our infrastructure, will we have a focus on something like a Clean Air Act, and if not that, something that tries to maintain quality air for our Jacksonville citizenry? And that's my concern because as we are working to build our infrastructure, sometimes it's possible that we let other important environmental issues go. So my question is, will we have a Clean Air Act, or will we work very forcibly in order to maintain high air quality in our city?
Thank you for the question. There's no question that we don't want to go back to the bad days of bad air in Jacksonville, which was a huge problem, and she's referring to former Mayor Tommy Hazouri, who focused on that issue. We will maintain, and it will be better. We will make sure we're not going backwards. And I think one of the things that was pointed out yesterday was we have to all work together with EPA, with the environmental organizations, the port, the city, the state, to make sure we do it right. The other thing is that it has to be a public-private partnership. We have to work with the private sector to drive this process. You know, as mayors, we believe in focusing on making sure we create that environment for business, and particularly small business, those entrepreneurs. Just a couple of weeks ago, Mr. President, I hosted the first Mayor Brown Business Builders. Over 450 entrepreneurs showed up, and they want to be a part of the American dream. They want to expand their business. They want to launch other businesses. They want to do business abroad, and so we're going to continue to focus on that like a laser, but we will make sure that we adhere to the Clean Air Act by EPA that exists now and make sure we maintain our good quality of life right here in Jacksonville. So we will make sure that happens. Thank you for that question. That was a good question. Yes, sir.
Mayor Brown, Mr. President, first, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you. My name is Joshua Rodriguez. I am a dual citizen of U.S. and Brazil, and I preside over an organization called Brazil-Florida Alliance. I travel back and forth for the past 25 years. I've been involved in logistics, international trade between mostly these two countries. First of all, I'd like to make a comment. Commend all this effort that's happening here today, because I can tell you, even though I hear some mentions about the U.S. Degrading on the scale in worldwide and so forth in the economy, there's still one thing that I can assure you from the perspective of foreign perspective, is that people outside are still looking for U.S. leadership. Mm-hmm. And leadership is very important, and they're definitely involved in that. Another thing that I'd like to mention is we hear also of 98% of companies that are involved in exports here in the U.S. are SMEs, small, medium enterprises. And you compare that with what I know to be true in Brazil, 92% of the companies that are involved in exports in Brazil are also SMEs. So the concept of cities and so forth and organizations to establish a better communication among those SMEs is very important, because as those SMEs learn how to export more, obviously that growth is going to happen automatically. I do have one question. I heard of the importance of inland ports, as well as we know for a fact the importance of ports, seaports. I would like to ask, what are the city's involvement in the dry ports? If there are some efforts going on into that. As we look in the future, we know that the space availability at the seaports are going to be as limited as possible. We see in L.A. how land costs became very, very pricey, and a lot of people started moving out of the region because of that. we fear that I see in the future also prices are going to go up here in Jacksonville and the ports as well, port areas. What are we, is there any programs or anything being done as far as dry ports? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, you want to answer that?
Yes. Is it on? Okay. Yes. I can speak particularly here in Florida. Inland ports, inland intermodal centers, as we are trying to call them, are clearly an important part of what I think the mayor's really focused on yesterday. Was we're not just ports. We're not. We have mayors from Arkansas and from other inland where we have inland waterways. It's truly a system, and the system needs to be connected to take advantage of the wealth of our seaports as a country, the wealth of our rail that's been invested, the wealth of our interstate system, and where those also can connect. We have several that are here. One's in Lakeland, about an hour from here. And that, in our particular state, in this year's legislature, there's been a $5 million appropriation to help with the planning on how they connect to rail. It's in our system, SIS plan, System Intermodal System. So we're clearly planning for it here. You're seeing it done in other states like Ohio. Columbus has a huge inland port facility. There's others, Memphis. So these are becoming major multipliers of our gateway infrastructure at our ports. And I think that one of the things that you heard a lot yesterday as well with these mayors is the need for a national freight policy. And that national freight policy needs to focus on strategic investment in our system and identify priorities, how we invest our dollars wisely, which has really never been done in the federal government. It's always done very parochially by members of Congress and whoever has the most seniority or position on a committee. So that is really happening here in Florida. It's happening in other states. And I think you'll continue to see the evolution of inland ports and facilities that connect rail, interstate, and our ports in the inland parts of our country.
Thank you, Paul. Yes.
Hi, Neil Henriksen. I'm an attorney and business person here in Jacksonville. I have a question about the particulars of the Conference of Mayors export program, and it relates to this. Obviously, the United States has a huge trade deficit with the likes of China, and the mayor talked about freight going back empty overseas. Now, does the Conference of Mayors program that you're working on with Brookings, does it deal with financing? For instance, U.S. Export-Import Bank financing foreign partners for, let's say, a Jacksonville business that looks to export. The particulars about that, is there anything in the works for businesses to deal with having its foreign partners financed?
Yeah, so the Export-Import Bank is one of those that the business community, the chamber, and others deal with. Clearly, it's a great organization to partner with. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say that's actually you hit the nail on the head of what we need to do to really expand and make this initiative more effective. We've got to get our federal partners to understand that putting capital to work to help us improve our export stream is critical. So that's an area that with this broken Congress that doesn't seem to understand that jobs is the imperative, and obviously doesn't pay attention to most of the economists who have said that all the markets and where they're growing are outside of the country. There hasn't been a focus on that up to now, except from the administration who put this together.
Yeah, and so the good news about that is, though, that Fred Hochtenberg, who's the executive director for Ex-Im Bank, is a former entrepreneur, ran SBA, gets it, understands the marketplace, really knows that in order to compete in the global economy and be competitive in the marketplace, you got to provide access to capital and credit to small business in any emerging markets. They tend to focus on untapped markets, those markets that have a lot of potential for growth. So, as chairman, I'm going to make sure we do our part, partnering with the federal government on some of those opportunities. Same thing with the international trade and the U.S. Department of Commerce. So really, one of our goals is going to be to create this one-stop shopping of menu on the federal side, where if a small business and entrepreneurs want to access those opportunities, they can go to one place. It's all making it simple and relevant to the business community, but they do have the right person in that job who I think would be more than happy to continue to help us expand the marketplace, create opportunities for our small business and entrepreneurs in our cities.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor. I'm Vic Guillory. I'm the Mayor Brown's appointee for Military Affairs, Veterans and Disabled Services. I want to first of all thank the mayors for visiting Jacksonville also, and for giving us sort of a strategic stage to have this very important discussion. My point, though, that I would like to make here is that a lot of what was discussed today, I think the key to it goes back to personnel, goes back to the people, the imagination, the creativity that's going to take our ports and exports to the next level. I believe that the people we're talking about need to have a global vision, a strategic sort of imagination. In many cases, they need to have traveled to see these airports and these ports around the world, to have an image of what a good one looks like that has a lot of investments behind it. I can tell you there's a source out there available to all of you, and that source is going to grow. That source is our veterans. As you know, the Department of Defense is, for many reasons, are going to downsize the military. And there are personnel coming out of the military that have been to these ports that are comfortable saying good morning as buenos dias or bon dia. And that these folks I think, can add immediate value to you in key positions. There may be opportunities when you take your message back to Congress to encourage them to provide some grant money so you can develop some internships and encourage the military, as they transition from the military, to come in to see if there's some mutually beneficial areas to work with you. So that's my message. Consider that workforce and consider veterans. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Admiral. Let's give the Admiral a hand. So proud of him. Two-star Admiral, Naval Academy, served his country, and now he's the Director of Military Affairs for me. So I'm happy to have him.
And hit it right on the head. I mean, if you get an opportunity, and I mentioned that super very quickly when I was speaking, if you get an opportunity to travel and you go to airports around the world and you go to the Autobahn and the different high-speed rail, we're debating in California right now whether we should build high-speed rail. And the issue is the cost. And I tell people, I just rode the Shinkansen in Japan, moved 2 billion people over the last 50 years, and we're debating how much we're going to spend. We gotta make these investments. My answer to them is, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to build it maybe 25 years from now, and it's going to cost a lot more then than it does now. We've got to make these investments. And the investments in people, which is why I was talking about language, is very, very important. We've got to see, politicians love to talk about, diversity and being a good thing. Well, guess what? Business people need to talk about why it's so important. When you have people that work for you, that come from all over the world, their connection to those places and to the world and those markets are going to bring you value. They're going to add to your ultimate bottom line. So that's a point well taken, Admiral. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service to our country.
I think we have time for one more question.
Good morning. Salbona. I'm Tangela Manley. I'm from South Africa. I'm Enterprise Florida's Southern Africa representative. And I was very moved by what the mayor said about saying that only 1% of American corporations export, and of those 1%, only 6 markets are targeted. And I just want to tell you that South Africa and Southern Africa is a very rich market, and they are very open to American products. So think about other markets other than China and Japan and Latin America. Think about Africa. We have an office in South Africa, and we're here to service Florida companies at least. But Enterprise Florida's model is a very good model, and it's a model that can serve some of the other cities as well. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Senator Hill, for inviting me.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mayor Brown. I have a couple of comments and observations. A couple of years ago, maybe 3, the federal government allocated about $360 million for ports across the country to engage in strategic risk management planning. Mr. President, you spoke about the empty containers, about 18 million of them coming into the country. And I'm wondering if we thought about taking those empty containers, and I know we want to fill them up with products and send them back, but have we thought about the empty containers, turning them into other products and marketing them or exporting them abroad? Housing, for instance, a number of communities have taken those empty containers and turned them into housing, and very successfully. And for those countries that are suffering from housing issues, perhaps we could market those back to those countries so that they don't go back empty, but at least we're sending products back. Now, the question is, can the federal government give us the same kind of incentive, the $360 million spent to do strategic risk management planning, but use those incentive dollars for small businesses? I have a small business as well, state committee man, but I have a small business as well. I've already been to West Africa 3 times, and we're now looking at Brazil to do some small exporting. But that's my suggestion, using those empty containers, not just let them sit around, but use them and create housing products for other countries.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, I know you want to wrap this up, but I felt compelled to discuss one other essential and critical element to this whole success of this project, and that's the development of a skilled workforce. We're working in the secondary, we're working in the state college, community college arena, as well as university, but it requires more. It requires engagement at the bureaucratic level with the municipalities, cities. It involves engagement at the industry level as well as the company level. So I just want to bring that element, that essential element to the success of this project. Thank you.
Very good point.
Just a short comment. Is this on? Yeah. Our Port Authority and others have brought terminals to this community. The port is very important. I'm afraid that not too many people in our community, it may be this way around the United States, are aware that the consumer goods that they buy, 90% came here by ship, and we need to build the infrastructure to make it work, as we've heard today. And I just wanted you to know, as I was sitting at the table as this conference commenced, how proud I was of you, Mayor Brown, for having the emphasis that you do, and for the Conference of Mayors for having the emphasis on ports. It's something so vital. We've heard that this morning, and we thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hopefully.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully this is the last comment.
We got a few more minutes. We have like 5 more minutes.
Okay. Mr. President, Honorable Mayor, my name is Michael Nelson. I'm retired, but I'm known around the county community that I like to help things. And one of the solutions I have, Mr. President, is that we'd like to take some pressure from the EPA off of you and present some problems to our own community in that maybe you could find it in your heart to send some of those ships over to us and some of the other mayors in the community.
Smart man.
You know, actually got asked what I was doing here in Jacksonville, helping folks compete with the city. But actually, your point is an important one. The reason why I think we're all focused on this initiative is because 48% of our cities, our cities have recovered about 48% of the jobs that we lost before the recession. And mayors have been working day in and day out to try to figure out, working with organizations like Brookings and, of course, our conference, think tanks, what we need to do to put people back to work. And this was an area that we focused on because it's a real opportunity that we're not taking advantage of. So that means that we all have to work together, even if it means that we're all competing for market share as a result. We got to put the country first. So thank you.
Morning, mayors. My name is Kenneth Smith. I'm mayor of Kingsland, Georgia, about 25 miles from here. Interstate 95 runs through the city, and right now we don't have very much seaport worth. I have a lot of cameras running through town with BBC and Oprah Winfrey Network doing some filming, and we happen to capture that program out of about 40 cities. So right now that's a little funding that's going on right now, but later on that'll be gone, and we still need to shore up our infrastructure, our communities. And I'm very proud of what the city of Jacksonville has put on this weekend with other mayors from around the nation, and I'm very happy to be a part of this. We do have some waterways in the area, and it's important that we get involved in what's taking place, looking at the Panama Canal finished and being completed, and with the interstate as busy as what it is running through the city, it's important. We look at our infrastructure needs. We talked about that quite a bit, and I won't be redundant by going through that. But we must be able to reflect the bigger picture of the benefits and opportunity that it would create by investing up front to secure future opportunities for the next generations to come. And it's important that I believe that we look out for our future generations that's here now, that we need to do that. And with the power that's here now, I believe that this is a good starting point to do that. We can turn this economy around by being proactive, and elected officials that are proactive individuals that see what we've been talking about here this weekend. And for our citizen nations, then we can have a future for our grandchildren for the future years. The economics behind the ports and other transportation modes will pay for the investment into this national infrastructure plan agenda that the U.S. Conference of Mayors is set out to accomplish at this meeting this weekend. And I'd also like to say that I heard someone talk about inland ports. Well, I've got 14,000 acres that's got rail access and close to the interstate. So if you're worried about something like that, just come see me, call me, and we'd be glad to talk to you about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I really want to do a couple of things, and I'm going to turn it over to our president for final remarks. One, I want to really take the time to thank everyone who made this possible. I want to thank Tom Cochran, our executive director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Let's give him a hand for his leadership. Dave Gatton. Dave, thank you, Dave. Let's give Dave a hand. He's staffed this. I want to thank all the volunteers of my staff. Thank you so much. Let's give them a hand for working hard on this. I want to definitely thank Paul Anderson and Jerry Malott. Where's Jerry? Jerry, stand up, please. I want everybody. Thank you so much. Let's give Jerry Malott, Mr. President, one of the things that I did in my administration, I have several top executives working for me for $1. I got Jerry working for me for $1, and I really appreciate all the things that the Jack's Chamber and all the other chambers, we all came together to make this possible. And finally this, Mr. President, I am so humbled and honored to be chairman for Ports and Exports for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I thank you for this opportunity. It means a lot, not just for me, but for Jacksonville and mayors all around the country, focusing on issues that matters, putting the nation back to work, really focusing on the future for the next generation. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm humbled to be the chairman. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I don't think I've been referred to as Mr. President as much as I have, and I think it has something to do with my last name. How long?
Verdegosa.
How long and difficult it is. Right after I was elected president of the conference, I had a meeting with President Obama. I think you were there, and he was sitting right across from me in the Gold Room, and he said, Mr. President. And I smiled, and I said, I prefer mayor. And then he looked at me, and he said, I prefer president. So I actually like to be referred to as mayor. But thank you so much for your hospitality. And I know that the mayors who were here yesterday, and the vast majority of them who participated yesterday, have said that the first part of this task force meeting, this conference forum, was excellent, that they really got a lot coming out of that meeting. It is heartening to me how many of us, both people who represent cities with seaports and inland ports and dry ports, are focused on this area. And I think what it says for the business people here, mayors are a lot different from the people you see in Washington. My Vice President, Mayor Nutter from Philadelphia, likes to say there's not a Democrat or Republican way to pick up the trash, to fix the potholes, keep people safe. We got to focus on getting things done. And we put together a common sense jobs agenda, and this exports initiative was part of it. And what we did was we went to think tanks that have historically been associated with the Democrats, think tanks that historically had been associated with Republicans, think tanks that were nonpartisan, and we said, what are ideas that you have to revive the economy, to put people back to work, that have had Democrat and Republican support over the last 50 years? So they identified a number of areas. This was one of them. They said, you can get some market share here. This is an area where we could really increase jobs in the United States of America. So we took it on. And we're knocking on the doors of the Congress to convince them they got to take it on as well. I mentioned for the Surface Transportation Bill, Reauthorization Act, you got the Chamber of Commerce and Labor, who tend to fight a lot, but understood that was an area that they needed to come together on. We need to come together as a nation to focus on job number one, and that's job creation. And that means we have to focus on providing a better business environment for all of you, because we don't create wealth, you do. We've got to support particularly small business, because they're the motor force of the United States economy. And we got to do the smart things. Make the smart investments in ports and airports and our roads, our bridges and our highways and our cities that generate 90% of the GDP. So I couldn't be more thankful to you, Mayor Brown, for inviting us here to Jacksonville, for opening up that southern hospitality that is always so warm and gracious. And thank you for having us.
Thank you, Mayor Verdegosa. Let's give him a hand for his leadership and that kind remarks. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We're going to take back these issues and ideas. Tom Cochran and the staff and everybody are going to pull this together so we can present this at our national meeting in Orlando this year, where we will present it and come up with a resolution that's going to be strong, where we take it to Congress and really get buy-in and really make it happen. So, because we have a presidential election where we want to make sure that those who are running, the two candidates, know that this has to be a top priority in the next administration. We want to make sure we put America back to work, and what way to do it to support small business and entrepreneurs, focusing and investing in our ports and exports, and really positioning this country to compete in a global economy. Thank you, and God bless you for coming. Thank you so much.